The sky over Highway 212 shimmered like silver glass, the heat turning the mountain road into a wavering mirage. It was the kind of dry, blistering afternoon that made even the birds stop singing. And that's when Frank Miller saw her. He'd been driving that route for nearly 30 years. Log runs, rescue shuttles, some days just for the peace of it.
There you go, sweetie.
But nothing prepared him for what lay on that bend
medicine.
near Pine Hollow
You are
Pass.
such a good patient. Yes, you
At first he
are.
thought it was drifted snow. Then he saw the blood. There, curled on the edge of the asphalt like she'd simply gone to sleep, was a creature out of myth. White fur, thick and pure like mountain
We
frost.
just need to confirm the
A
property
bobcat,
lines for the
no
forest
question,
renewal program. So it
but
hasn't
pale as
changed in 30
starlight,
years, but
her
who
flanks
is?
smeared with drying crimson. And beside her, movement. Frank pulled the truck over, tires crunching the gravel.
The tracking data
His breath
confirms
caught
this
somewhere
is a
between
higher
his
range.
chest and throat. The engine ticked as it cooled. He stepped down into the still air, the heat slapping him hard, and walked slowly toward the scene. His boots left dark prints in the dust.
Aren't you beautiful?
3 small
Right?
bodies huddled against the mother's belly.
What a good
Kittens,
cat.
barely more than whispers, tucked beneath her, trying to nurse on something that would never feed them again. Their fur matched hers, soft, pale, fragile. Frank dropped to one knee, a hand trembling toward his radio. Mountain River Wildlife. This is Frank Miller. I think I just found an albino bobcat. She's gone. But the kittens, God help me. They're still breathing. He didn't move after that. Just sat with them, his broad frame casting shade over the tiny lives. The wind stirred once, carrying the sharp scent of pine and blood. He didn't notice. He only watched them breathe. 20 minutes later, a dusty silver SUV pulled up, blue lights flickering faintly. Dana Holloway stepped out, her boots hitting the road like a starting gun. She was calm, even in this heat, even in the face of heartbreak. She'd seen more animal tragedies than she cared to count. But this one knocked the breath from her lungs. "Where is she?" Dana asked. Frank pointed, his eyes refusing to leave the kittens. "Over there. I didn't even see her until it was too late." Dana crouched, inspecting the mother. Her fingers moved with gentle finality. "True albino," she murmured. "White coat, pink nose, blue eyes. Poor thing never stood a chance out here." She leaned closer to the kittens. 2 mewed weakly. 1 didn't move. Dana's voice dropped. "This one's ice cold." She reached into her van, pulling out a heated incubator, hands moving fast but sure. She placed all 3 inside, one by one, her face unreadable. Frank stood watching, helpless. "You did the right thing," she said. "You called. You stayed. That might have saved them." He nodded, just once. As Dana pulled away, tires kicking up a cloud of fine dust, Frank stood alone again on the highway's edge. The sun dipped lower, casting the world in gold and sorrow. In the back of the van, nestled in fleece and warmth, the smallest kitten let out a faint cry, then fell silent again. Dana tightened her grip on the wheel. "Not today," she whispered. "Not if I can help it." The Mountain River Wildlife Clinic sat nestled in a small valley, hidden behind lodgepole pines and the gentle hush of wind chimes hanging from the porch. Dana rolled into the gravel lot just as the sun began to drop behind the Absaroka peaks, painting the sky in streaks of coral and ash. Inside, the air was cool and smelled faintly of iodine and lavender detergent. Dr. Miriam Cole, veterinarian, surgeon, miracle worker, was already waiting in the treatment room. She was still in scrubs from a coyote surgery earlier, sleeves rolled, hair tied back tight. Dana barely had the incubator set on the table before Miriam was lifting the lid. "Vitals?" Miriam asked, not looking up. Barely there, Dana replied. The small one hasn't moved since we left the site. Miriam's hands were already moving. Oxygen tubing, tiny heart monitor leads, heated pads. We've got maybe an hour, if that, she murmured. Get me glucose gel and prep the warming fluids. 50 cc's, low and slow. Dana obeyed silently. There was no room for panic here. No time for the heartbreak they were both feeling. The room shifted into something sacred. A blur of quiet effort, practiced urgency. Miriam worked with a sort of reverent intensity. Her fingers so precise it seemed they might coax life back just through touch. The smallest kitten, a female, remained limp. No pulse, no breath. Miriam leaned in, pressing 2 fingers just below the ribs. Nothing. She exhaled slowly. She's gone. For a second, everything stopped. No one moved. The overhead light buzzed faintly. Dana blinked hard. We still have the others. Yes, Miriam said, snapping back into motion. We do. The 2 survivors, a slightly larger male and a quieter, delicate female, were holding on, but only just. Dana fed them glucose drops while Miriam adjusted the temperature on the incubator. Their tiny bodies twitched, their white fur already warming. The male let out a hoarse, breathy mewl. I'll call the state office in the morning, Dana said softly. They'll want to know. An albino bobcat? It's unheard of in this region. Miriam nodded. They're miracles. And miracles require work. For the next 2 days, Dana barely left the clinic. Every 2 hours, she or Miriam would take the kittens out, swaddled in warm cotton, and offer them formula. The feedings were delicate. A drop too fast, and they'd choke. Too slow, and they'd fade. They named the male Birch, for his soft white fur and sharp cry. The female they called Micah. She was smaller, watchful, never once making a sound. But her grip, tiny claws digging into Dana's glove during feedings, was fierce. The story spread fast. By the 3rd day, local news had picked it up. By the 5th, the clinic's live stream, set up discreetly at the back of the incubator, was gaining hundreds of views. Then thousands. The comments rolled in. Those eyes. They look like angels. Please tell me they'll survive. But behind the screen, reality hummed in the shadows. There were setbacks. Mika stopped eating one night. Birch developed an infection that required delicate antibiotics. Dana kept a cot by the supply cabinet. Miriam rotated 12-hour shifts. Outside, the world fell in love with 2 tiny white kittens. Inside, the people keeping them alive were running on willpower and whispered prayers. On the 8th day, Mika opened her eyes. They were pale as the moon, and they found Dana's face. Hey there, little one, Dana whispered, a tear sliding down her cheek. You're still with us? She didn't know why she said it aloud. But maybe it was because, in that moment, it didn't feel like just a kitten staring back. It felt like something had survived that wasn't supposed to. And it was watching her. By the time the snow melted off the northern ridge, Birch and Mika had outgrown the warmth of the incubator. Their fur was fuller now, still ghostly white, but fluffed with health. Birch was bold, always first to eat, first to explore, and quick to hiss if anything came too close. Mika, on the other hand, moved like a shadow, silent, measured. She watched everything with those soft gray eyes, blinking slowly, almost too wisely for her size. The clinic staff set up a new enclosure for them, a soft wood den made of pine logs, fleece bedding, climbing branches, and a single red blanket tucked in the back. A blanket that smelled faintly of Whisper, their mother. Dana had kept it from the roadside scene. folded tight inside a sterile bag, not even knowing why at the time. Now, she knew. Mika curled against it almost every night. The live stream camera followed them into the new space. Comments flooded in. Look how strong they're getting. Micah's so graceful, like a dancer. Birch has my heart. What a little lion. People sent care packages, donations, letters from school kids. A woman in Idaho crocheted a toy mouse shaped like a snowflake and mailed it with a handwritten note. For the miracle twins. Still, Dana couldn't shake the heaviness in her chest. Something didn't sit right. One night, long after the clinic lights had gone out and the live stream was quiet, she sat at her desk watching old footage, trying to catalog every behavior, every feeding time, every weight chart. Birch was thriving. Micah was improving. But there was a question she couldn't answer. Where had their mother come from? Albino bobcats were virtually non-existent in this part of Montana, and she hadn't been tagged. No collar, no tracker, no known sighting. Dana ran searches through the state wildlife network. Nothing. She emailed colleagues across 3 neighboring states. A few responses came back, notes of awe, curiosity. But no one had record of a female like Whisper. It was as if she'd appeared from the mountain mist and vanished into it again. The next day, a letter arrived. It was handwritten in careful block letters and mailed from a small P.O. box in the town of Eagles Rest. Dana, I saw your live stream. Those kittens, they're not wild-born. Not exactly. I believe I knew their mother. If you're willing, I'd like to talk. E. McCrae. Donna stared at the note, her fingers going still. Elsie McCrae. The name carried weight in her world. A recluse, a legend. The best feline rehabber the state had ever known. Rumors swirled around her like fog. She could tame lynx with a glance, some said. Others claimed she once nursed a mountain lion cub back to the wild, with nothing but goat's milk and silence. But she hadn't been seen at the clinic in almost 6 years. Not since the Whisper case. Dana didn't hesitate. That evening, she packed up the file on Birch and Mika, printed photos, and drove toward Eagles Rest. The road wound up through switchbacks and thin pine. Snow still clung to the shadows. The GPS gave out 2 miles before the turnoff. She found the cabin by instinct. It sat tucked between ancient spruce, the wood faded gray by sun and time. Wind chimes hung from the porch, all silent. The door creaked when Dana knocked. Elsie opened it without a word. Older than Dana remembered. Still wearing the same oil-stained flannel and patched denim. Eyes sharp, mouth unreadable. Dana held out the photos. I think these are yours. Elsie took them, sat slowly on a wooden bench just inside. The photos shook in her hands. When she looked up, her voice was a whisper. My God, she made it. Dana sat beside her. Elsie's eyes never left the pictures. That was Whisper. I raised her. She was too wild to keep, too clever to cage. I released her last spring. Thought I'd signed her death sentence. You didn't, Dana said quietly. You gave her a chance. She gave you something back. Elsie nodded once, a single tear tracking down her weathered cheek. Then let me finish what she started. Back at the Mountain River Wildlife Clinic, the staff were hesitant at first. Not because they doubted Elsie McCrae's skills, she was a legend for a reason, but because of her silence, her methods, the way she moved like she belonged more to the forest than to people. Mark Reynolds, the clinic director, stood in the observation room with Dana, watching Elsie through the glass as she knelt beside the kitten's enclosure, saying nothing, doing nothing, just watching. Are we really letting her take over their rehab? He asked. Dana folded her arms. She knew their mother. Whisper trusted her. That's enough for me. And the live stream? People are invested. Donations are flooding in. They want cuddles and bottle feedings and... They want a story, Dana interrupted. So give them the truth. These kittens weren't meant to be pets. They're ghosts of a wild thing we lost. If anyone can return them to that world, it's Elsie. Mark sighed. Fine. But the camera stays. Even if it's just trees and silence. And so it began. The live stream stayed on. But the angle changed. Pulled back, distant. The once cozy enclosure transformed into a shadowy, wild space. More branches, less light, fewer human hands. A new sign appeared beneath the feed. Birch and Micah have entered a critical rewilding phase. Human contact has ceased. Please respect their journey. The comments turned. Why is no one cuddling them anymore? Are they okay? They look lonely. Where's the lady with the nice voice? Elsie ignored them all. She wasn't here for an audience. She spent the next week watching, cataloging, listening. Her notebook filled with details. Mika's sleep patterns, Birch's stalking gait, the way they responded to unfamiliar sounds. Then, slowly, she began to teach, not through touch, not through treats, but through memory. She brought out the speaker system, small weatherproof devices she mounted in hidden corners of the enclosure. Then she pulled an old laptop from her pack, its screen cracked, stickers peeling. She connected it to the speakers, inserted a flash drive. The first sound that played was not a human voice. It was a low, throaty chuff, Whisper's chuff. Elsie had recorded it back when she'd raised Whisper, when the albino Bobcat had learned to trust her, to feed, to move, to live without needing anyone. At first, the kittens froze. Then Birch crept toward the food chute, where a small dish of raw meat had just appeared. Mika stayed back, eyes narrowed, head tilted. The next day, same routine. Chuff, food, silence. By the fourth day, the moment the sound played, both kittens dashed toward the chute, anticipation in every step. Elsie watched from the shadows, notebook in hand. Good, she murmured. You're remembering. Next came the video footage, black and white clips of Whisper stalking birds near her old enclosure, dragging prey behind rocks, creeping through underbrush. Elsie projected the clips against a camouflaged screen inside the enclosure. Then, with a quiet pull of a string, she dragged a feather-tied toy across the dirt. Birch pounced first, clumsy but eager. Mika waited. She crouched, watched, moved only when the angle was right. Her strike was silent, surgical, a perfect replica of the mother she'd never known. Elsie smiled. Not wide, not soft, but with something fierce behind her eyes. Your mama's still teaching you, she whispered. That night, alone in the guest cabin behind the clinic, Elsie pulled out a box she hadn't opened in a year. Inside was Whisper's broken GPS collar, recovered weeks after her signal had gone dark. Cracked, mud-stained, silent. She ran her fingers over it, the metal cool against her palm. I thought I lost you out there, she whispered. But you made it. You made them. And now it was her job to make sure they never needed her again. Not ever. Spring settled gently over the Absaroka Range. Snowmelt trickled into creeks, wildflowers opened like secrets, and the wind carried the scent of pine and damp earth through the clinic's outdoor enclosure. For Birch and Micah, the world had changed. Gone were the soft blankets, the scent of human hands, the easy warmth of bottle feedings. In their place, silence, cold mornings, unpredictable meals, and the sound of their mother, long gone yet echoing through every lesson Elsie designed. The food chute was no longer dependable. Sometimes meat appeared, sometimes it didn't. Sometimes it was a mouse, pre-killed at first, then freshly stunned. Sometimes the sound of the chuff came before it. Other times, it didn't. Elsie was breaking the pattern, testing their instincts, forcing them to rely on more than comfort. And they were adapting. Birch grew bolder, climbing higher, snapping the necks of mice with surprising precision. He stalked insects for practice, lunged at shadows. His coat shimmered white against the underbrush. But his movements grew quieter, his presence more elusive. Micah remained the watcher. She was often still for long stretches, body low to the ground, eyes tracking birds beyond the mesh. She rarely made the first move, but when she did, it was flawless. Elsie kept meticulous notes. Each week, the enclosure expanded. More brush, more climbing logs, a small artificial creek. All of it designed to mimic the wild they'd eventually return to. Dana visited occasionally, but always stayed outside the visual field. She brought fresh supplies, helped with vet checkups when needed, and read the live stream comments aloud at night, when Elsie needed a reminder of the world beyond the woods. "They look so lonely," Dana said once, reading from her tablet. Elsie didn't look up. "Good." Another comment. "Why won't the woman show them affection? They're just babies." Elsie snorted. "They're not babies. They're predators. They're supposed to fear us." It was working, but it was painful. For Elsie, the hardest part wasn't the work. It was the moment Micah began to question her. It happened late one afternoon. Elsie had been checking the enclosure's fence line, ensuring no scent trails led back to the human paths. As she stepped out from the cover of the trees, Micah appeared at the far end. She didn't run. She didn't hiss. She sat, still, watching. Elsie froze. The two locked eyes, woman and wildcat, a dozen yards between them. Micah's ears flicked, her head tilted ever so slightly. Then came the sound, a soft, low chuff. It hit Elsie like a punch to the chest. Micah was asking, "Are you the one? Are you her?" Elsie stood still, heart hammering. Every instinct screamed to respond, to offer a whisper, a smile, a whisper of kindness. But she couldn't, wouldn't. So she became stone, expressionless, breath slow, no movement. Micah waited, then chuffed again, a little softer. Elsie didn't answer. After a long pause, Micah's posture changed. The curiosity faded. Her eyes narrowed slightly. No longer a child searching for comfort, but a predator reassessing a threat. She turned, soundless, and vanished into the brush. Elsie didn't move for another 5 minutes. When she did, it was only to sit down on a nearby stump and let the breath out of her lungs in one long, broken exhale. Inside her chest, something cracked. But outside the fence, in the growing dusk, she whispered, "That's it, girl. That's what it means to be wild." Later that night, Elsie stood over the desk in the clinic's side office. She pulled Whisper's broken GPS collar from her pack, placed it on the table, and beside it, something new. A pair of freshly minted tags glinting under the desk lamp. They were engraved with only one word each. Birch, Micah. Elsie reached out and placed a hand on them, then closed her eyes. "One more test," she whispered. "Just one more." They called it the trial run. The enclosure had been expanded for the final time, now stretching into a half acre of tangled brush, rock outcrops, and a dense cluster of pine toward the rear. A hidden gate allowed live prey to be introduced undetected. This wouldn't be about reflex anymore. It would be about instinct, patience, control. Birch failed the first test. The rabbit, fast and agile, darted through the underbrush like smoke. Birch barreled after it, full of strength but little strategy. The rabbit juked, doubled back, vanished into a hollow log. Birch clawed at the ground, panting, confused. He didn't try again. But Mika waited. She perched high in the crook of a narrow tree, body stretched along the branch like melting snow. Her eyes never left the rabbit's path. For hours, she didn't move. Not when the wind picked up, not when the shadows shifted. Only when the rabbit paused, twitching its nose near a patch of clover, did Mika descend. Not like a pounce. Like gravity stopped resisting her. She landed with no sound. The rabbit didn't have time to squeal. Elsie watched it all through the screen in her cabin, her face unreadable. When it was over, she leaned back, one hand slowly pressing against her heart. "Whispers, girl," she murmured, right down to the last breath. The next morning, Dana brought in state biologist forms, mandatory paperwork for potential release. She laid them on the counter, watched Elsie scribble dates and weights and behavioral summaries in her tight, clipped handwriting. "We should plan the release for mid-May," Dana said. "That gives them a few more weeks to build muscle, refine their kills. I can start scouting locations." Elsie didn't look up. "I already have a place. Same valley where I released Whisper." Dana blinked. "You kept the coordinates?" "Never forgot them." She tapped the collar on the table. "The one that had stopped transmitting a year ago. This time, there's no signal to lose. They'll know how to disappear." That evening, as the sun dipped behind the mountains and shadows spilled like ink across the pines, Elsie walked to the enclosure fence. Mika was perched on a log, staring out. Birch sat beside her, chewing on the remains of a mouse. Elsie didn't speak, just held up something in her hand, a piece of the red blanket, the same one that had comforted them as newborns. She gently threaded it onto a low branch at the gate, let it flutter in the wind like a silent banner. A final scent, a final reminder. Micah stood, slowly approached. She sniffed the cloth, tilted her head once, then turned back toward the trees. Birch followed. Neither of them looked back. That night, the live stream was shut off for good. A farewell message was posted. Birch and Micah have completed their rewilding journey. Their enclosure will be closed to human viewing. Release is imminent. Thank you for being part of their story. The comment section exploded. "Wait, what? Can we at least watch the release? Why are they taking them away from us?" Elsie read the messages in silence, then closed the laptop. "Because they were never yours," she said to the dark. In her dreams that night, she saw Whisper again. Not dead on the side of the road, but alive, moving like fog through the forest, eyes bright, coat shimmering like morning frost. And behind her, two shadows followed, silent, wild, homebound. The air in the Absaroka Valley was sharp with spring that morning. Mist clung low to the ferns, and the pine needles held tiny droplets like glass beads. Elsie's truck bumped along the old forest road, its back lined with thick straw and two silent transport crates. Inside them, Birch and Micah waited. Donna followed in the clinic van with Dr. Miriam riding shotgun, a clipboard in her lap, and silence between them. They didn't speak much on the drive. There was nothing left to say. The work had been done. What came next wasn't theirs to control. Elsie pulled off the road just before the creek crossing. A narrow path, invisible to the untrained eye, led through the trees to a hollow sheltered by ridge walls on 3 sides. A glacial stream curved through it, and the canopy above opened just enough to scatter sunlight across the moss. It was the same place she'd brought Whisper a year before. Only this time, there would be no collar, no signal, no second guessing. The 3 women worked in silence, carrying the crates side by side, setting them on the pine needle-covered earth. Donna unlatched the latches, but waited for Elsie's signal. Elsie knelt by Birch's crate first. His yellow eyes glared through the mesh, breath steady, muscles taut with contained energy. She smiled. "You're ready, tough guy. Don't screw it up." Then she turned to Mika's crate. The female bobcat was still, watching her. Not with fear, not with need, with something else. Recognition. Elsie leaned in, pressing one weathered hand against the mesh. "You were never mine, but I was always yours. You understand that now, don't you?" Mika blinked once, slow, deliberate. Elsie stood and gave Dana a quiet nod. The doors were opened from a distance using pulley ropes. The locks clicked. The gates swung wide. Birch was gone in a flash, white fur vanishing into the underbrush without so much as a rustle. Mika stepped out slowly. Each paw was measured. Her body was low. She tasted the air, flicked an ear toward the distant creek, then turned. She looked straight at Elsie. That look held no affection, no hesitation, just a truth. "I see you. I know what you did, and I carry it with me." Elsie said nothing. She just nodded, once. Mika turned, and with one fluid bound, disappeared into the trees. The woods went still. Donna let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. "Think they'll be okay?" Elsie didn't answer right away. She looked up at the pines, listened to the wind. Then she said, "They have their mother's blood, and each other. They'll be more than okay." The 3 women stood there a long while, not speaking, just listening. Somewhere in the distance, a bird called once, then again, then silence. On the ground near the crates, a single tuft of white fur stirred in the breeze. Elsie bent down, picked it up, and tucked it into the breast pocket of her flannel. "Goodbye, Whisper," she whispered. And then, more softly, "You did good." Weeks passed. The forest swallowed their tracks, as forests do. The release site grew quiet again, the pine needles undisturbed, the rabbit paths uninterrupted. There were no collars to track, no live streams to watch. Only the old trail cameras Elsie had once placed deep within the ridges, long forgotten until now. She returned every so often, never with a team, never with noise. Just herself, a thermos of black coffee, and a notebook she rarely wrote in anymore. One late afternoon, as storm clouds gathered low on the horizon and thunder rolled somewhere beyond the southern ridge, Elsie climbed to the overlook above the creek. She sat on the same flat rock she'd once used to watch Whisper vanish, knees stiff, back aching in the damp air. She watched and waited. Just before dusk, something moved below. 2 shapes, barely visible through the trees, pale fur brushing against shadow. One larger, muscular, bold, the other smaller, more precise. They moved like they belonged there, like they'd always belonged there. Elsie didn't move, didn't breathe. The smaller figure paused, lifted her head, ears perked. Even from this distance, Elsie could tell. It was Mika. The bobcat's eyes swept the ridge but didn't search. She knew. She didn't chuff. She didn't cry. She simply turned, flicked her tail once, and disappeared into the ravine. Birch followed. Elsie sat there long after they were gone. She didn't cry. She didn't smile. But in the quiet that followed, between the thunder and the wind, she heard it. The soft, familiar sound. A chuff. Low, far, but real. And for the first time in over a year, Elsie let herself believe in something more than just survival. She believed in return. The next morning, she packed up the last of her things from the guest cabin, left the red blanket folded on the windowsill. Whisper's collar she placed in the clinic's archive box, along with a note that simply read, "She came home, in them." Dana found it days later, tucked between old intake forms and feeding charts. She didn't say anything, just placed it back where she found it. The live stream was never restarted. The comment section eventually went silent. But sometimes, late at night, when the pines shifted and the moonlight danced across the frozen ridges, a hiker or hunter would swear they saw a flash of white between the trees. Two ghosts, running free, one bold, one watchful, and somewhere behind them, always close, the whisper of a mother's memory trailing like fog, wild and eternal.